you to Fortis BC for sponsoring that last networking break. We're going to get started right away with our next panel titled Navigating ESG, Successes, Challenges, and Opportunities at the West Moberly Corporate Alliance. So please join me in welcoming back to the stage Kory Wilson, the Executive Director of Indigenous Initiatives and Partnerships at BCIT, the moderator of our next panel. And I'll just point everybody back to Slido once again. Please scan the QR code, send in questions so that Kory has some awesome questions to ask our panelists. So Kory, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some of those cookies. They were delicious. So this panel is... Oh, sorry. It was on the screen. Anyways, this panel is on ESG. We did have a little quick chat about does everybody know what ESG is and what's that about? But we're going to talk about success and challenges from the case study of West Moberly as an example, and then hopefully engage in some discussions and give you some takeaways of what are keys to success, how to overcome some challenges and the different opportunities that are there. But we'll start, and I asked them, I said, would you like me to read bios? And they're all like, no, no, no. So we'll have everybody just, well, you can see who they are, and I think most people on the panel are very familiar to most of us in the room. But I was going to start with Sharon, and not because you're the lawyer in the room, but as Dallas was making comments about lawyers earlier, but I think because there is a very, in your work, a very unique perspective, being a lawyer, being involved in multiple projects, and the concept of ESG, and if maybe you can just highlight what that is and have just a few words about that.
Sure. I'm going to start with a quote from Premier Eby because I think it's really true and I hope you make it happen. He said that every time a lawyer gets a standing ovation, an angel gets his wings. So I want that. I am currently living in Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh Territory in Vancouver. Thank you for having me here. I think all of you in the room would have been to any conference or open up your inbox, you would have heard of ESG. And perhaps I can just simplify it as to what it originated from and what my takeaway is. So ESG is a set of, I would say, standards or principles that looks at the non-financial criteria that impacts an organization's success. Now, that's what they say. So under ESG, you know, they like to put it under E, so your biodiversity, your waste, your water. The S will incorporate your employees, your OHS management. It's not a science, it's evolving. And the G would include cybersecurity, your policies that you have for governance. And I would say Indigenous values are embedded through all three pillars, and they're all interconnected. And the reason I say I don't really like that definition is because when we think about ESG and non-financial factors, all those factors impact the bottom line. You cannot make a project happen or make it successful if you do not address those issues. So they all impact the financial aspects. They're just not expressed or evaluated in a financial manner sometimes. And one last thing, Kory, in terms of when we talk about ESG, you know, you hear about ESG ratings, you hear about ESG standards, you hear about ESG frameworks, and it becomes really convoluted. At the end of the day, the standards and frameworks just tell organizations, here's how you can assess and report out on some of these criteria that may be material to you. The reporting agencies, and I don't mean to get cynical here, make a living out of saying you have a bad rating, you have a good rating. If you want a good rating, come talk to us and we'll tell you how to get a better rating. And they do so by essentially pulling out data that exists already. So the rating agencies have their own methodologies. It's not, again, rocket science, because they look at, have there been any negative press around this company? Do they have policies related to X, Y, Z? If they do, then you get a good check mark. And that's how really the rating agencies work. Everything you hear about the EU standards or supply chain standards, et cetera, that's all being now brought up under the umbrella of ESG. So in short, ESG means a lot of things to a lot of people. It's all encompassing, but at the end of the day, it's simply the set of factors that truly influence an organization's bottom line and its sustainability in the true sense of the word.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I mean, it's a bit of a holistic approach to doing business, right? Other than just looking at the bottom line, it's looking at all of the different factors that you say that contribute to that, and about reinvesting in the business, reinvesting in community, reinvesting in all of the opportunities that surround the nation or the community with which you're working. So Rob, as your role at West Moberly, and with the Alliance, would you like to talk about how you've started to, because I know your motto or is investing in community and reinvesting and balance and making sure that it's a partnership and working together. So how have you incorporated ESG into?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And
in 2 words or less, no, way more words than that. But
yeah. And thanks for that definition, and after listening to it, I think I shouldn't be up here. I have no idea what you were just talking about. No, I'm just. So I work with West Moberly First Nations, Treaty 8, Northeastern BC, and there's a few Treaty 8 chiefs here from Prophet, West Moberly, and Blueberry. And if you haven't yet, you should introduce yourself to them because there's a lot of activity going on in their territories right now. I've been working with West Moberly for about 25 years, so I know the community quite well. In this current role in kind of economic development for the past 4. And I was given a kind of a specific mandate by leadership, and that was to generate own source revenue that could be used by the community to reinvest in the community for different programs, new programs, or to augment existing programs that may have been underfunded or didn't exist or needed some help. So that's my job. And for the most part, economic development in that part of the province is oil and gas and mining. So that was kind of my lot in life, to chase this type of opportunities down. And in doing so, and working with West Moberly, I realized kind of the lay of the land for me was, okay, I'm working with an Indigenous community whose priorities and principles may not always align with the industrial activities that are occurring in their territory. Okay, I understand that. My job is to pursue some of those industrial activities in the territory for all these very good reasons. So how do I find that balance? And then about 2-3 years ago, we started to observe that basically all of the industrial players in Northeast BC had developed ESG programs. They were proud of them, they were public, they were promoting them, and it was primarily for their shareholders and third parties to look at their performance, as mentioned. And we thought, okay, there's some value here in what they've developed. I'm not going to say it was poor work, but there's something there that we can use. And so I'm going to come back to Kory's kind of mandate for us 4 up here, and that was focus on success, challenges, and opportunities. So that was the lay of the land when I came. I had this kind of dichotomy of principled approach to development. You had industry doing their ESG, and you had West Moberly kind of in the middle of all of this. And so the successes, can I jump into this? Yeah. And so the successes, we canvassed the ESG programs that industry was utilizing. And some of the people on the panel that we work with have ESG programs to see what all the commonalities were. It's very rigid in its approach. We said, okay, we have standards, international standards of how ESG is measured and collected, but there seemed to have been a gap, and the gap was how do we incorporate West Moberly's priorities and principles into a West Moberly ESG? So that involved a lot of, as my colleague Ange will describe, will go into detail, a lot of community involvement and consultation and with leadership. And so the success was we decided to embark on our own ESG journey, which we're still on. So to me, we jumped into the ESG deep end of the pool. And that's gutsy, I think. It took leadership to say, go, do it, figure it out. And so that was our success, I think. And so we did put that together. You want me to pause? Oh. Keep going? I'm going to do my challenges. I'm going to get this out of the way.
You're all done Once,
Yeah.
okay. So I never have to go back to you again then?
Yeah. That's right.
Just kidding. Go ahead if you'd like.
And then the challenges. The challenges were many. We have multiple companies, and how do you align them all? They all perform different scopes of work. We had challenges insofar as ensuring that the members, who are the shareholders at the end of the day, that's who we're speaking to. We wanted to make sure that everything was transparent and they knew, as the shareholders, the activities we were involved in, and did it align with those priorities and principles. Tough job. And then finally, one of the more difficult processes we had was industry has these ESG programs. They're all over the place. They're online. They're in print. Did they care that we have one? I'm going to come back to this one. We didn't know if they cared. We certainly thought, there's some common ground here. We can collaborate. So those were the challenges. The opportunities. The first one, I think the huge opportunity for us is we can make mistakes. And we're going to, and we have, for sure. The other opportunities are, how do we work with industry and help them understand that we can collaborate with them, and through our supply chain services, we can provide more information to their ESG program. Through our supply chain services, we can bring West Moberly's perspective to their ESG program. It's very high level when you read industry's ESG reports. It doesn't go into the granular, who's doing what. We think we can bring that to the table. So we see a huge opportunity there. Just pause for the other folks. Thanks.
That's great. I think you bring up a lot of things that all of us have to think about, particularly in the in between Indigenous and non-Indigenous interests. Is that alignment? Is that influence of the very specific cultural practices as well? The idea that you just jump in because there's no roadmap for any of this type of work that probably the vast majority of us are doing in this room. So you have to have the courage to do it. And I really appreciate also hearing that it's okay to make mistakes. We don't want to make mistakes, but it's what you do after you've made a mistake that makes the difference and make it important. And I know this goes along with Ange and her what you've not only studied in school, but your area and what you work at. I think you're likely there to catch us when we jump into the deep end of the pool. So what has been your experience?
Yeah, I bring my floaties. Yeah, this experience, when I first was introduced to this initiative, I've worked with Westmo for about 3 years. This is probably about 2 years that we've been doing the program and the ESG program. And yeah, there's a roadmap that you can follow with ESG. You can go to any of the frameworks, GRI, TCFD, and they do provide that information on how you report your KPIs, which, great, that's math, that's tracking, that's, get your engineers to submit what their GHG or their liters of fuel, whatever the case may be. But then there's the other piece of ESG, which is very much to do with how you manage those topics. How do you improve those specific KPIs? How do you bring them down, bring them up, depending on what it is? So that's where I found the most, the most creativity in how to really bring West Moberly values, priorities, and goals, because a lot of ESG is about goal setting and creating goals for your organization, and how you really, how you manage your topics. And that was conversations we had with a lot of our partners. When we first started this program, there was 5 partners who were ready and willing and excited to report. And now we have that up to 15 out of 18 that are eligible. So it's a lot about bringing folks into the journey and having a deep understanding of, how we can align our processes, how we can bring in, for example, reclamation. You can say you did X amount of reclamations a year, but it's also about how did you do the reclamations? Who did you consult? Who did you talk to? What other businesses did you work with in terms of, native plant supply? Did you talk to the Natural Resource Department, who has a lot of this data available to not just do reclamation, but do reclamation in a way that really aligns with the values of the nation whose territory you're on? So that was a really big, it was a really cool experience to be a part of developing that and thinking through how we can make this meaningful and make it not just about reporting your KPIs. I mean, don't get me wrong, love looking at data, love a good Excel table, but what's behind that? What's behind the data?
Great, thank you for that. And then Lisa, I know obviously ESG is a collective commitment. It's something that everybody needs to be involved in. You can't just hire somebody to do this and to write this and to do it. And I know you're very much about action and not, because this is the challenge, right? Is we have, whether it's UNDRIP, implementation of UNDRIP or DRIPA or implementation of ESG, what does that actually mean? How do you actually do that authentically and not performatively? And I know this is really one of the areas you're very passionate about. Would you like to talk about that?
Thank you. I'm Lisa Risvold, and I work for a mining company, Conuma. We are a coal mining company with 3 mines in Northeast BC, and we're in the process of restarting a 4th. I have had the pleasure and privilege to work and raise my family in Treaty 6 and Treaty 8, and it's really an honor to be here today and to be welcomed. As a mining company, you're right, I am all about action. I may drive our ESG professionals. They may not always understand or respect my focus on action, but if you have standards and if you say things but you're not delivering and you're not adding value, it really is not meaningful. And resource development in coal mining, certainly the value and the wealth that is generated is extensive. It is a lot. And we know as companies we must do this safely. We must manage our impacts. And I would say that we have to be equally committed about providing opportunities and benefits to the Indigenous nations in the territories that we're operating, and also to rural communities. And I'm very fortunate to work for a company that is a genuine commitment that we have. I understand the value of ESG and the need to set goals and to measure, especially when you're working with engineers. That's a motivator. I do like the definition and the principle of sustainability, and I will borrow from the ESG report and Chief Wilson's quote and vision that West Moberly First Nations, their aim is to contribute to the economic well-being of community, to focus on supporting a healthy, vibrant First Nations community that will grow across generations while honoring Indigenous values. And that's where the opportunity is. Ange, I really liked your, and agree 100%, reclamation, and how can we as a company better work together and collaborate with Indigenous nations. I would say our success as a company, and this should be our success, is ensuring that we are providing meaningful economic opportunities and benefits to Indigenous nations and their businesses. There's many things as a company in resource development that are totally out of your control. However, your procurement strategies and your processes are 100% in your control. And you need to demonstrate success and results in that area to ensure that those living in the areas where you're mining and are being impacted, that they are benefiting and that their children are benefiting. And I am gonna just talk about, or just note, the opportunities. I will first say, as someone that was born and raised in a rural community, I hope we give ourselves, we're talented and we're intelligent, and we probably need to give ourselves credit for that. I mean, look at the people on the stage and in this room, and to have a confidence to take things forward and to take risks, and that will affect long-term change. When I think about opportunities, it is the restoration economy and truly working in a collaborative way with Indigenous nations. Right now, as a mining company, you develop a 5-year plan, you consult. It's not really as meaningful as it needs to be. So there's tremendous opportunity here. It allows the long view to be taken, and it will allow Indigenous nations to take the wheel. It's also only logical and natural that we are working in a collaborative manner for nations to be involved in the planning, execution, and of course, monitoring. And I also there's tremendous opportunity in terms of community development. So how can companies and nations and rural communities work together more collaboratively to address some real complex and difficult challenges? And I would just say our company, I hope it's felt that we do value the relationships and partnerships with West Moberly as well as the other nations that we work with. And I mean, today is a very good example from Conuma's perspective, and I won't get into the details, but how tremendously important and necessary those relationships are. So thank you.
So you've touched on a couple of things that many people have mentioned already today, how incredibly important relationships are and how they continue to evolve. They're not just a one-off, it's an ongoing thing, as well as the idea that opportunities, right? It's opportunities that are there for all of us if we work together and if we collaborate. And I know the motto is driving progress through unity, which is something that I think all of us want to see progress in our communities. We are better off when there is unity in our communities, when there is collaboration between and amongst us all. So Sharon, in the work that you do, because I know you have a vast array of clients, what are some of the keys to maximizing opportunities, or what are some of the keys, maybe top 3 keys to what have people done or communities done that have made them more consistently successful?
Thanks. It would have been good to rehearse some of these answers before. So, like someone else that was up here, I might ramble a little. So let me start just by explaining that I typically represent proponents, and I represent ECDEV Corps of Nations. So I'm not a rights and title lawyer in that regard. I just assume that there are rights, and I work with that. In terms of, so when I am I provide that color because I'm looking at it from a proponent perspective. And I want to start with something and sort of tie it together what you said. Westmo has put out their ESG vision. I'll call it a vision and not a program if that's appropriate. And when companies sort of first say, look at a project or look at a region, right? Assume it's not brownfield. I'm doing the diligence on that. I'm looking at what are your risks going to be, mostly from a risk perspective first, and then what are the opportunities. And typically, if you don't have knowledge of the community, you haven't worked with them, you're kind of shooting in the dark by looking at what's publicly available. Many community plans, in terms of nation plans, are not publicly available. And so you're going off media articles, which may or may not be correct. You're going off talking to people that may have worked in the community. Having something like what Westmo has done provides you at least with a snapshot of here's what the key material topics for this nation are. And here are the key risks as well as the key opportunities, and the piece being opportunities. So you can take a crappy asset and you can turn it into a brilliant thing if you can capitalize on those opportunities that previously weren't looked at. You can also take a very good asset and turn it to shit because you haven't turned it to whatever crap pile because you haven't looked at what has made it successful, right? So to your questions, which is, what are the, I think you said the opportunities or what are some of the success factors? One, communities that actually have vocalized the vision and made it easier for the proponent. And I know, that is a capacity issue as well, because at the end of the day, rather than waiting for the proponent to actually get it right, which sometimes they will, and sometimes
they won't.
Exactly, right? You have said, here, we've done some of this work for you. Look at it, do your due diligence on it, and then you tell us how you fit into this. That is really helpful. The other is, as many of you in the room know, no nation is they're not homogenous, so their objectives may be different. And a lot of nations have done this work whereby they look at how they reconcile internally, but they also reconcile with their neighbors. And having that also, and I know, you're doing the proponent's work for you and the government's work for you, but at the same time, the success lies in doing this together. And so if I'm looking at it from advising potentially a community, that's what I would hope to invest some of my time in, because of the governance that I think, governance opportunities it brings to the table. And so a nation-led governance on, what matters in their territory, the roadmap to what they also envision is happening in their territory, be it procurement, be it, frankly, no-go zones, be it training, be it nothing to do with natural resource projects, but something completely different. More and more proponents are looking at not exactly what's within their wheelhouse, but to look at, if I am to do what is within my wheelhouse, but that is not fully aligned with the nation's vision, how can I leverage whatever the nation wants and add support to that? And so in sum it up, really, it's, both the companies need to have their wherewithal and have to do their diligence. The nation has done their diligence, but they need to, I would say, vocalize it in a manner that would make it easier for people to do business.
Mm-hmm. So communication. And then you mentioned as well earlier transparency in the discussions and in the ongoing progress. I haven't had a chance to read these questions yet, but I will just go to Rob for a second, because one of the things that's been consistently mentioned throughout all of the presentations today are the opportunities, whether it's in fishing, whether it's in forestry, whether it's in this area, but also the idea or the notion that some people think that there's a pie, and that if X nation gets a piece of this pie, then I'm somehow going to get less. How do you, in your area, in West Mobe's example, how do you overcome some of those kind of fears that people may have about, well, we can't give to this group because this group, or how do you keep the groups together, working in the same direction?
Right. So do you mean like in terms of industry saying dividing?
Well, I think just everybody. I mean, there tends to be an fear that is out there. Mm-hmm. People have a fear of Indigenous people being successful, and I know Gabby said that earlier. Like, the reality is, if Indigenous people succeed, mm-hmm. Canada will succeed. So if Indigenous people in the Peace River area succeed, then that area is going to be successful. So how do we overcome what I see as increasingly fear-mongering and this notion that there's a pie, mm-hmm. and because there isn't a pie, there's no pie, but how do we overcome mm-hmm. that in this work?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll answer that one, but I do want to just come back to Sharon's points earlier. It's an important piece that you mentioned there. The information is available, and it's available for anybody to pick up and read and get a better understanding of West Moberly. We've seen a slow uptick. Lisa and her group have been good, and we appreciate that. But in terms of other industry, so we're starting to strategize, well, most of these industries want some type of agreement with West Moberly. Let's bake it into that agreement that they have to work with us via our ESG program and their ESG program. They're the same, or they're similar. But in terms of your pie question, we've been trying to collaborate as much as possible with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities and partners. I see there's some folks here from McLeod Lake Indian Band. We try and collaborate with McLeod as much as we can, if it makes sense. And same with Soto First Nation and others. So that's a good dialogue that's unfolding there to avoid those types of challenges. Insofar as the non-Indigenous community that's situated where West Moberly is, there's a good dialogue between the West Moberly government and, say, the town of Chetwynd. This weekend we're participating in a gala fundraising. West Moberly does invest in the community for services to non-Indigenous folks as well as Indigenous. So that relationship building, I think, can alleviate some of those perceptions that you've noted.
May I add? Yes. I understand the question. I would say that a company that is very committed to providing opportunities to Indigenous nations, the local districts, and non-Indigenous businesses, so it grew the pie regionally, which it should. And so in 2022 and 2023, in terms of Conuma's spend with Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses, and through our payroll, and then also capital investment in a large project, which includes Indigenous and non-Indigenous, it was about $1 billion. That doesn't include taxes. And that's a significant shift than what would have happened in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it's focusing the benefits and the opportunities locally where they should be. And like McLeod Lake, Indian Ban does show, we see the cooperation. So Jacob's here, and he does an amazing job at working with West Moberly and other nations to create and build those opportunities. And it's shifting the thinking from imagine what's possible if we work together, and are very intentional on finding those opportunities, defining, agreeing on where we want to go, and just being committed to taking the next 2 to 3 steps and trying to get those right. And so there's no need to be a fearmonger.
Well, definitely there's no need to do that, but people for various reasons seem to be doing that, right? And it's increasing. And maybe, Ange, I'll ask you that. How do you find, because I know you work with people and getting people to communicate, and what do you have suggestions on how to, I guess, crisis management or motivate or?
Oh, definitely. And that was definitely one of the challenges we faced, not so much from outside perspectives, so fearmongers, but it can be jarring or confusing when you start saying, you know, we have this ESG program and this is what we require from you in terms of data. This is what we want to know. For example, you know, your GHG emissions, your fuel consumption, your electricity, your water use. These are all things that we've introduced in our tracking system. And for partners, initially, when you start asking for that data, there is the fear of, you know, if I use more fuel in my operations, just because that's the nature of my operations, maybe you're a trucking company, am I going to get penalized, or are you going to like look at that data, and is that going to affect our partnership? Is that going to affect, you know, how I'm able to get work, or like our partnership together? So a lot of the work that we did in the very beginning that was really, really important for me was to have those discussions with partners and be very clear and have a very clear idea of, okay, how we're using this data, who's going to see it, what it's used for, what its purpose is, what it won't do, what we won't be doing with the data as well. Because it's sensitive information as well. So what you'll notice in the ESG report, we have the ESG action plan, which was based on the kind of feasibility portion of, you know, seeing if this is possible, and then we're gonna have our full-fledged ESG report coming out in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. It was really about understanding the larger impact of the partnerships as a whole, as West Moberly Corporate Alliance. So the fear that I experienced in this program wasn't really coming from outside sources, but it was a fear of, you know, not understanding or needing to walk through the path together in a collaborative way, so that folks understood the value of reporting this information to community, because this is kind of, we are using this as a kind of a two-pronged approach. One for clients, you know, the publicly traded, the Shells, the Suncors, to, you know, say we're speaking the same language. You know, you're using GRI, we're using GRI. You know, we can just directly contribute to, because a lot of our partners are service providers, so they'll be considered Scope 3 producers, emission producers for their clients. So, you know, getting the, you know, protecting the risk there of, you know, we would not want our partners to lose out on work if they're losing a bid because they aren't tracking their Scope 1 emissions, so they can't, you know, that we're coming down to a point where that might be asked in RFPs. It's already starting to happen. And then, but on the other hand, wanting to be able to show community that data as well, and demonstrate it in a way that's understandable, and that they have a clear understanding of what's being done through the partnership and what the impacts are and what the partners are doing to mitigate impacts and kind of bring the community along in that as well. So the fear, on the onset was definitely, it was a question, it was a discussion, but it was a challenge that I think was a really good discussion, and I think we moved past it really quickly and really well once we had that discussion with partners and they were able to see the value not only to their business outside of the partnership, but also through the partnership as well.
Thanks for that. And now that we've established that, the first question that we have there, which I'll give to Sharon, has ESG become passé?
Look, I think I hate the term ESG, by the way, just so you know. And I understand where the question's coming from. For those of you who may not be aware of BlackRock, Fidelity, et cetera, in the US especially, there is a lot of political pressure because the way ESG has been defined or at least been talked about is very much in the language like this is woke policy stuff. This isn't going to impact your bottom line. This is all about diversity, hiring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it fundamentally misses the point, which we started with. If you improve your environmental performance, like let's just give you a basic example. You reduce your water consumption. You're going to do better because you reduce your costs. You reduce your emissions. You're going to pay less carbon tax. Therefore, it equates to a better financial performance. You're going to set yourself up for a world that is being regulated, and therefore you are contributing to your bottom line. So I don't think ESG is ever going to be passé because it's never been passé. The term has been coined more recently, but the factors have always been there. To stay that, in terms of investment criteria, I can't see BlackRock, for instance, coming in and saying, that company has no support from the local communities. Its emissions are way up here. It's going to be essentially not looking at any sort of innovation whatsoever to reduce the emissions. And it's operating in a jurisdiction where it has carbon tax, where it actually respects local communities and Indigenous communities, and they have a say in the way they get permitted. We'll go and invest in that, and we'll pay big bucks for it. Like, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen because there's a big risk. So investment bankers, any sort of smart investor is going to look at that because it impacts the bottom line. And so, I don't want to get passionate because that's not what lawyers do. But I think some of the media rhetoric around this in terms of walking back, they're just walking back from the terminology because there is a sort of I'll use the word woke for short because that's how the media is utilizing it. And it's been ESG equals woke politics or woke assessment. And that's not what it is in the true sense of the word. So for me, it is actually about what's impacting the bottom line. You want to do better, you want to find opportunities, you assess those issues. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, so one thing for sure, nations that govern well do well. Communities, companies, people who govern well do well. So governance, manage social issues, social challenges, as well as environmental. It makes absolute sense. What it's called could be something different. Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Sharon was saying, we're currently in British Columbia, there's the new Center for Excellence in ESG. So I hope it's not going to be passé, because that center just opened. It'll be really interesting to see what that center's mandate will be in British Columbia. Will companies be mandated or required to have some form of this information available? I don't know. To invest in BC, to work in BC, will it become ingrained in all, provincial procurement processes? So let's see how that unfolds. There's some folks here. Raise your hand so we can come and track you down. But from there, there's a couple folks here from the center, and there's some information available online. But I think that speaks to where this is going, kind of provincially. It's going to evolve for sure. But it's interesting. You know a little bit about you, don't you, Sharon?
Just a little. I have my ex-managing partner, but she's on the advisory committee. So all that to say, just look at it from ESG. Just look at it from common sense of where are you where is there the best opportunity to reduce your costs and find the opportunities?
Yeah, I was going to say too, because what essentially it is, it's risk management. And this is something that companies have been doing. That's what you do. It's just defining the kind of, you're just putting your risk management in 3 buckets and giving it a name. As well as, talking about Canada and being at passé. I mean, there's the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, so they're looking at standardizing frameworks as well and reporting out. So we'll see how that unfolds and kind of what comes from there as well. But it's definitely from, being in, going to downtown Calgary, it's definitely, especially in the oil and gas industry and energy industry, it's something that's definitely kind of here to stay from what I can see. I hope so. I'm riding on that from a career.
I was just going to say, I mean, look, we already report out. It's just not consolidated. So when you're hearing things like Canadian Standards Board or ISSB or TCFD or GRI, don't worry about it. We're reporting already. What's missing is a consolidated standard set so that you can go, company A does this. I can look at now company B, and they will also do this. That's really what those things are here to stay, and you might have seen the Supply Chain Transparency Act, again, another pillar around that about ESG reporting. We already report our emissions for certain standards. I think to your point about the Center of Excellence, what the opportunity is to really showcase why British Columbia has this, I keep on using that term, why it has, give me another word for, has his things together. Like whatever the word, insert it together, okay guys? Because companies are looking for, hey, do you have hydropower? Great, because we're gonna have lower emissions. Do you actually have a framework where we can tap into your regulatory framework where you're gonna respect the rights of Indigenous peoples and they have self-determination, so we're not gonna face boycotts or other things? Sure, great. I worked on, for instance, Volkswagen and other sort of transactions like that. Those are what big investors are looking at. They're looking to de-risk by going in jurisdictions that understand the value of this.
All right, so we have about 3 minutes left, so I think I'll go to each panelist and talk about, I see the word new opportunities. I don't think we have time to respond to that one specifically, but just generally, can we normalize adding the I for Indigenous? Oh, ESGI. That's another whole conversation. We don't have enough time for that one, but yeah, thanks for that. I think we're all here again. This is the Indigenous Resource Opportunities Forum. We're here because we all want to see success. We want to have this province be successful. We want the nations to be successful. We want our families to be successful, individual First Nations people as well to be successful. What is the one, I guess, hope that you have going forward for how we're going to move this forward? Or what is the, our one thing that you think people in the room need to know in order to create that kind of future? I know it's not fair. It's a big question.
I'll just go first because it's going to be pretty simple. I think people just need to be really honest about the challenges, because what I find in conversations, everybody says, we want to collaborate, we want to work with you, we want to respect reconciliation. But some of it is really tough. Like, some of the issues you got to work through are tough. So having, I'm going to call it the space to actually be very like, here's what we're dealing with. We can't give you this because we've got X, Y, Z to worry about. And having that like respect, and I call it respect, but also the transparency, coming back to what Rob said, it's really important. And I think that's the only way we can actually fulfill the opportunity that's actually present, is if we accept the fact that some of this is going to be really hard work, and don't just expect the gold standard to be achieved right away. So it's incremental. You're not going to get everything you want, but there is like stages, and you do it in a phased approach. I mean, to me, that's one way.
Yeah, definitely. Lisa?
I agree. My hope is that we have the time and space to have very honest and transparent and respectful dialogue on the complex issues, both from a resource development and management perspective, but also at the community level. So how can we improve everything, taking a very holistic approach?
Yes. Thank you for that, Ange.
Yeah, I mean, bringing it back to the kind of West Moberly ESG initiative, in terms of answering that question, I would say the goal, or one of the goals within this initiative, is really to say, and I like how you said it, Sharon, as well, you hear a lot of words, you hear a lot of reconciliation, you hear a lot of, yeah, we want to have meaningful relationships, we want to do this, we want to do that, partner with us because of X, Y, and Z, we're so great. But it's really about, you know, when you ask them, okay, great, happy for you. We want to see the data. We want to see, are you tracking Indigenous employee? Are you, you might say you have an Indigenous relations policy, but, you know, what's the result of that? What's the tangible success or challenges? And be honest about it. If, you know, if the numbers are low, ask yourself why. Why are they low? And then start the journey of improving those numbers with the communities that you're working with. So I would say that's the biggest benefit and the biggest opportunity with this type of program. You know, you can call it ESG, you can call it something else if you don't like ESG. It's really about understanding, you know, you have all these goals or you have all these wonderful words, but what do they do? What is the action behind the words? What are, you know, are the goals attainable? So for me, that's my ESG hat, my sustainability hat is kind of really how I see that developing.
Great, thank you, Rob. Last word, Rob.
Well, it's being said. Thanks, Kory. You're doing a great job. I think for me, it's really, we're using this as a vehicle to share information about what's important to West Moberly First Nations. It's available. You can use it. You can work with us. But you can't say that you didn't know. And that's an important part for us. You know, it's there. It's a vehicle. It's a tool. Let's use it.
Definitely. Well, there's no question that you guys have created a strategic alliance that is something that can be modeled in other places, and the reinvestment in the community and the advancements that you've made in the amount of time that you've been around is great. And I really also appreciate all of your comments about the fact that this is not easy work. Systemic change and it requires bold and courageous conversations and requires a lot of hard work. And we're not going to get anywhere if we don't do that. So performative, inauthentic, just lip service is not going to get us where we need to go. And I think that's kind of the challenge for everyone in this room, and we heard it earlier, is how do you make the places and spaces that you occupy better, and ask yourself what your role is in ESG, in reconciliation, in these things that we all are going to face and are facing as society. So I'd like to just thank the guests, and I apologize, I didn't get to, I was using two hands, and I found it really difficult because I couldn't look at my notes. But so I appreciate the ability to just kind of go with the flow, really thankful, and we'll just thank you for your participation.
Well, thank you so much, Kory, and thank you so much to the panelists. And now on behalf of BC IROC and NANWCOLIS, I'm just pleased to present you guys with these speaker gifts. We'll do a quick photo and then jump right into the next panel.